The runes you must find, which the mighty sage stained, and the powerful gods made, and the rune master of the gods carved out. That is a translation from one of the poetic Eddas of the ancient Nordic people, and it is speaking or talking about ultimately the runes of the Elder Fathark alphabet, essentially. Now, the Elder Fathark alphabet is not an alphabet that is used in a language as such. It's not like you can put them one after the other and form a written language in a traditional manner. It's the oldest of the runic alphabets, and as such is more closer to hieroglyphics, I suppose, of the ancient Egyptians, where, you know, obviously if you go into the tomb or pyramid or whatever of an ancient Egyptian, you'll find, you know, all the walls are painted with hieroglyphics, or sometimes, you know, carved literally into the stone. And the hieroglyphics in this case are a way of communicating a story about whatever, you know, the pharaoh that's in the tomb, for example, you know, pronouncing his life deeds in life, and obviously the deeds that hopefully they hope he will ascend to within the afterlife, such as meeting their gods and so on and so forth. But the ancient Fathark alphabet or rune script it's different. It's similar to hieroglyphics, but different. It's similar in the sense that every single rune within the alphabet, of which there are 24 runes, so it's actually similar size to the English alphabet, but it's each single rune within the alphabet isn't a letter. It isn't just a single pronunciation with no meaning, such as the letter A is A. It's no meaning, and it's just a sound. The letter B, again, is just a sound, B, you know. And if you put a few of those letters together, like A, N, and D, A and D spells and now you have a word with some degree of meaning, basic meaning. It just simply means again. Okay. Now, within runic script, you can do a similar thing, which is called a rune binding, or the binding of the runes, where you put them together to form a composite rune. And in doing so, you create a rune of a much greater scope, a much greater power, essentially, than the two runes together. In this case, the summation of the two runes is, you know, the sum of the runes essentially is greater than the two parts, the individual parts. And you do see this used from time to time. It is an actual process of rune magic, in the binding of runes to form new runes ultimately. But it's done in a very similar manner to how we form words in today's language. However, because the runes themselves, as I say, are much more like ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics in the Elder Fathark script, in the sense that the runes themselves are not letters. They're actual concepts or meanings, quite complex meanings, such as Oruz, for example, is which is actually there on my finger there. Okay, is a rune which means strength, but it varies in meaning and conceptualism to some degree according to the context in which it's used or which it's placed. For example, if you were to place that rune on a sword, okay, if you were to inscribe it into the steel of a sword, the blade of a sword, it would lend the sword strength. It would make it harder to break. And in this sense, it's literally adamant strength almost. It's the strength, the physical strength of the sword, but also the strength of the wielder as well, which in theory would be enhanced by using such a rune. And this is why the practice of runes is seen as magic, because ancient Nords and pagans like myself believe that these runes can be used in such a manner to enhance the qualities of either individuals or, as I say, physical aspect things also. But it could also, mean almost like there are different types of strength. You've got the almost physical strength that we've just described, but it can also mean like a strength of mind, willpower, if you wish, a grit and determination, and its literal sort of meaning or representation. As you can see, these are almost like the shoulders of a giant race of cows, actually, that once existed and went extinct in the 1700s. Called the Autarks, I believe. The Aurochs. Sorry, the Aurochs. And that's where that inspiration for that symbol comes from. And so, just like with hieroglyphics, these runes do have a real sort of meaning within nature itself also. They are directly inspired by the experiences that ancient Nordic people had when they saw these bulls and these cows, which were way bigger than the modern day cattle. And modern day cattle are huge anyway. These are big animals, but when you see these other ones which are well over 6 foot tall on their all fours, they'd be above myself. I'm 6'2", and then their back would be above me. I mean, that's a big animal. That's a very big animal. And obviously having them being farmed or hunted by the ancient Nordic people, you can imagine that they would admire the strength of such an animal, and so hence why their sort of symbolic representation in the runes, how they inspired the way that particular rune, the rune of strength, looks like. So the runes are quite, once you get into them, there's a lot of learning to be done. You can learn a lot about history, the history of society, and how obviously their experiences of the ancient world influenced their art ultimately. Because that's one way of looking at the runes as almost a form of art, but they're not art. As I say, it had a functional value also, or at least in the beliefs of the ancient pagans, and as I say, a lot of modern pagans today. The runes have a role within magic. Now, there are a variety of different forms of magic within paganism, and as I've said before in other videos, magic within paganism is not the Hollywood style version of magic where you can throw fireballs out of your fist and bring up force fields around you to deflect, bullets and, stuff like this. It's far less cinematic, very subtle, and, the magic, simply knowing which herbs to put together, for example, into a salve or drink to bring a fever down, that would have been seen in ancient times as magic. Putting, using certain mushrooms, for example, within a drink to bring a fever down, well, that's actually got some scientific principles behind it, because antibiotics come from certain fungus, and if you took the fungus or which produces penicillin, for example, as its natural defense mechanism against against the bacteria, then if you were to crush that up and put it into a drink, then essentially what you're doing is essentially creating a penicillin drink. Okay, now that to the ancient people was magic, because bringing down a fever, I mean, that was potentially life-threatening, but knowing how to do that was seen as magic. And the runes are a little bit more obscure, so we say, than healing magic, in that sense, where you can directly see the science behind them. But they are definitely there, and obviously you've got to be a believer as much as anything for them to really function for you, at least on an individual level. But to me, obviously as a pagan, and very much a practicing pagan, I really do have a belief within this system, and the belief is, in my personal opinion, logical whether or not other people believe in it, because it's my own belief system. It's like, as I say, in other religions, believing people can walk on water and turn water into wine and stuff. If you genuinely believe that happened, then you believe in magic too. Okay, and resurrection, for of course that's very powerful magic. Okay, but obviously the magic that we'll be looking at within, because I haven't said actually, I started with a poem, but this is an introductory video to a new series. It will be incorporated into my Nordic magic series that I have here on YouTube, but it will also form its own series as well called runic magic. It will be a specific form of magic that I will separate for those who just want to look at runes. And within this, I will be describing the different types of runes that exist. As I said, there are 24 runes within the Elder Fathark, the Elder Fathark alphabet, and I will be describing the meaning, the pronunciation, as best as I can, of all the runes and what they would typically be used for, and how they would be used, and for what intention they would be used. And I will be telling you their use within a variety of, because runes can be used in a variety of different ways, and the different ways they can be used affects the magic essentially that is associated with them. For example, you can use them in the form of Gauda magic, which is incantation, where you recite the runes perhaps in a repetitive manner or in a certain order, and that is to bring around a certain effect, such as emboldening yourself and protecting yourself against fear. So if you are in a particularly scary situation, perhaps you're walking through a park late at night, for example, you see a bunch of lads and you are suddenly become afraid, you get that sort of fight and flight response. You can repeat a certain rune or a number of certain runes that are there to calm you, and also hopefully to bring protection to yourself, and prevent danger from coming your way. And really, you can see, even if you don't believe in the magic that is behind such things, they are almost like mantras or even prayers in many respects. When people get afraid in modern times, a lot of people will say, for example, the Lord's Prayer, or they will do the Rosary and stuff like this. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to bring paganism to the modern viewpoint. People do not think it's strange when people use like the Lord's Prayer, as I say, or a rosary to calm themselves down, because it's done. It's part of modern society, if modern Christian societies at least anyway. And so what I'm trying to do is try to show you that the practices that pagans do are no different. They are different. They're not, not doing the same thing, but they're no different in principles. In that sense, they're there for a purpose, and just because they did it in a different manner doesn't detract from the usefulness of what they were doing, and it doesn't make you crazy. It doesn't mean that you believe in things that are, in essence, impossible. It's simply, as I say, a way of almost focusing energy. That's how we, as pagans, like to see it, as all forms of magic are simply a focusing of energy of one form or another, and energy is life. That's another way of looking at it. And so by repeating, such as I say, Gauda magic and incantation, it's simply, for emboldenment, for example, is almost the same way as, what a modern day Christian would do for, as I walk through the valley of darkness. I know it's not Lord's Prayer, but it's another thing that often is said. They recite some of the Psalms or the teachings from the Bible, sorry. And so you can see how Gauda magic has validity. It's very valid. You can't say, well, this is a bit silly, a bit stupid, because it's done in other religions just in a different form. And so Gauda magic is incantation magic, essentially, and it's where you recite the runes to bring about a certain effect. Okay, and I will be describing, as I go through each rune, every rune will have its own video. I will describe to you what the rune is, what it looks like. I will also describe its pronunciation, as I say, to the best of my capacity and ability, and I will be working on its pronunciations before every video. And also, I'll be, as I say, discussing how it can be used in Gouda magic, where appropriate, rune binding, which is what I've gone into mentioned before about forming composite runes, but that's something which I might lead to a later video, because it doesn't apply to every rune as such. It's just a thing that you can do once you know all the runes. You can bring them together. So I might not discuss that in every video, but I'll then be discussing their purpose within spellcraft in one form or another. Such as, is it used for protection, healing, childbirth, creating a sacred space, fertility, sleep, pre-battle sort of runes, and of course curses. Okay, and I will also be showing you how they can be, over time, as we progress towards this point, how they will be used. It can be used for prophecy also, because runes can be used for prophetic reasons, to tell the future, and to show the past, both in their imminent and very long-standing forms. So you can say, most recently this happened, but in a long time ago this has happened to you. So it's a bit like reading your palm, or reading tea leaves, or whatever, you know. A lot of people don't believe in that stuff these days, but they still go to like the gypsies and stuff, and the gypsy caravans for a palm reading, or they go to a place where tarot cards are read. And if you believe in that, then of course you can easily believe in rune magic, you know, for the purposes of telling the future. And this is something we'll be focusing and the past quite heavily on, because it's something that you can do yourself, and it's also a practical thing for me to do also, because what I have done, and this is the exciting bit, and this will be a focus of every video also, is I will be filming myself creating runes or rune stones, which will then be later used in spells of all forms, but certainly prophecy. That's something that I want to use them for. And I bought today a range of gemstones. Okay, as you can see, I've got different types of jade, and a few other. I don't really know all the names of the stones. I've got some hematite somewhere. I've got some sunstone and all that. So you know, you can see how I've got, you know, different stones, gemstones for different runes. And what I'm trying to do is essentially, what I will do is, I've got an engraving kit, and this is hematite, by the way. I've got an engraving kit, and I will inscribe into the runes, into these gemstones, runes that I think should be really associated with the colours and the presentation of the overall gemstone. And I think it will just be a really good thing to do to create my own rune stones. The reason as such is, yes, I could have gone on eBay, I could have gone online, and I could have bought rune stones for myself, pre-made. One, it's more of a gimmick then. Okay, I'm not saying it is a gimmick, but obviously, you know, if you haven't got the skills to be able to do this, because this obviously takes some time, then obviously please go ahead. I'm not mocking you in any way whatsoever there, but I do have the skills in which to inscribe stone and inscribe metal and things like this. I do have the tools, and I have the craftsmanship to be able to do such things. And so, you know, it would, I believe, be an insult almost to the gods to simply take the shortcut and just acquire a set of rune stones. It shows more of a dedication to my belief system, but not only a dedication to the belief system that I'm creating my own runes, but it makes the runes, in theory, more powerful. When you create your own runes, you're almost putting a part of yourself into the runes, or you're having a personal connection with those specific set of runes, because you've created them. You've created what are just simply symbols on stones in theory, but by you putting the effort into them and perhaps even performing incantations as you're doing it, repeating the name of the rune as you're inscribing it, for example, can bring power, more power, genuine power to those runes. And generally speaking, the longer you spend creating the runes, the more effort you put in, the more powerful the runes will become. So it's not something to rush. Each rune could easily take 24 hours to produce, and I've got 24 runes to make. So that's, we're looking at least a month's worth of work if I worked every day on them to be able to produce them. And I don't even know if I could do them in an hour, because and I definitely can't do them every day because I don't have the time. But by focusing on them somewhere in the background all the time, yes, I'm doing this, and I'm putting the effort in, I'm finding the time, making the time, more importantly, to be able to create these runes, I essentially create more powerful runes. And I think that would be also more entertaining for yourselves to see, not only to hear like you can get from anywhere else. You can just go out and buy a book if you want to learn about runes. You don't have to come and listen to boring old me, right? But obviously that's your choice. If you prefer to hear it from me, brilliant, cool. But you could always buy a book or go online and just read things that are in the forms of articles and the rest of it. But with me, you also get the practical formation of runes, and then the use of those runes on video for you to see how they can be used. And as I say, what I'll be doing is using the runes for prophecy. Now, runes can be inscribed on a number of different things. They don't have to be just put on gemstones. And as I say, we'll get into spellcraft, so to speak, using runes as we go through it. We'll discuss every rune. So, for example, if you wanted, to place a layer of protection over your home, so that you feel that your family is better protected, that harm will not seek them out. You can't change fate, but you can at least protect them against minor threats, at least using your rune magic. Then what you could do is, for example, inscribe a rune above your door, or on the inside of your door, or around the house at just different points. You could cut it into the wood, or you could engrave it into stonework or anything like, or into wood or metal or anything like this. And by doing so, by using, there are 3 runes that you can use for protection. If you inscribed one of those runes onto your house, you would gain essentially a layer of protection. Now, again, how people might poo-poo this and go like, oh no, that's silly to believe that by inscribing a symbol onto your property that you can add protection to your household. Well, the Jewish people do it. They have little scrolls with prayers written on that they stick on every door frame, normally within their house, which is believed to stop bad spirits coming inside of the house. So that's a modern day religion that practices a very similar practice. So of course, it's a different way of doing it, but it's something which is just as valid and more permanent, may I add, because when you're inscribing it, when you're carving it into something, it ain't ever gonna go away, not unless you sand it out or whatever. But a piece of paper that you put on the door frame, that can be pulled off. Okay, so you are truly dedicating your home and your property to the gods at this point, to the pagan belief system. There are other things you can do as well. For example, if you are struggling with fertility, and we'll get into this, you might inscribe onto the bed frame, for example, runes of fertility to help you conceive children. I mean, what a wonderful thing to be able to do. If it doesn't work, well, no harm done, right? But if it does, and you're told that you can't have children, but all of a sudden you do, well, it's worth that 1 in a million chance that you might think that it might work. Now, I truly believe that these do work, and I know a lot of you watching this video will believe also, and I will obviously be showing you the best that I can on how runes can be used to enhance your life and the lives of others. Whether I'll be discussing curses or not, that's another thing. Runes can be used to curse individuals, and I will mention runes that can be used to a curse, but it may not go through the practice of how to put a curse on someone, because of course the way that you use the runes is different, unless those curses can be used in the form of self-defense, which some of them can be. You know, you use them as a sort of last resort kind of thing. And if you were to scream these out, for example, sometimes it's believed that, like for example, the Rune of Thorns, it was traditional translation. I can't remember off the top of my head. As I say, I'm learning the old language as I go along. But what you would know as the Rune of Thorns, which is on my hand actually. It's this one here. Okay, Rune of Thorns. This is a rune that, you know, if you were to incantate, wasn't a threat in the previous situation, as I discussed, where you feel like a bit in danger, you just use runes of protection, but the danger is still coming your way and you feel threatened. Say they pull a knife out and you are not capable of self-defense, you don't know how to defend yourself, or, you know, and you feel very vulnerable, then using the Rune of Thorns in a manner is a curse, but it is something that can cause people to very much back away. But it's something that you only use every now and then, because it has the thrown out blindly without knowing how to use it, it can come back and hit you with just as much force. So, you know, you can use the Rune of Thorns on people who aren't even in line of sight on the other side of the world, and you just throw it out and it will take time to get to them as a curse, you know. But the further they are, the more chances are that it will not hurt them, or you know, or do whatever you're seeking to do to them, and it will simply just bounce off them and come back to you with a right good wallop. And to be honest, if you're using it for such things, so you kind of deserve it. I don't exactly condone the use of curses, as I say, apart from in self-defense, because not the best of things. But of course, I know how to do it, but I don't know if I'll be sharing that knowledge with yourselves, because I've given my reasons, ethical reasons. But of course, there's nothing stopping you, if you really want to, at least from an academic perspective, going out there and learning what these ones are. By all means, go ahead and pursue them, as I say, especially if it's for academic knowledge. But if it's purely for cursing people, then I don't condone that. You don't have my blessing, at least, anyway, if that means anything to you. Anyway, guys, I hope you're going to enjoy this series. I'm going to start inscribing my very first rune. I'm not sure what well, I want to do the rune that I associate with the most, which is either Sorelu or Ruz. And I want to do a Ruz on hematite. There we go, hematite, because it's strong. Hematite is the ore of iron, and so this could be melted down, and you would actually, if you forged it properly, you'd get a very, very, very small amount on this, but you'd get a small amount of steel out of it with the right forging processes. So that is what I'm going to inscribe on my rune of strength, because I think it's appropriate. I'm also going to use, I've got two of these, I'm going to use the other one for the Rune of Thorns, which I described earlier is a curse, but it's a very strong curse, a very powerful rune. In fact, it's discerned to be amongst pagans as perhaps the most powerful rune of them all. But that's why it would be bound to metal, if you understand, to show its strength, but also to bind it and contain it, unless you of course choose to release it. So thank you for watching, guys. I hope you found at least this introductory video entertaining. Obviously it might not be too educational at this point, because I haven't really told you too much, but I've given you hints towards and names of different runes, and I hope you're excited for this series, because I very much am. Thank you. See you soon.